Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for teams building on-chain. I'm your host, Kelley Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of crypto communications and PR strategy, and founder of BITWIRE, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in our space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Proof of PR Season 4. Today's guest is someone who practices what she preaches, and what she preaches is getting to the point. Amanda Whitcroft is the founder of Whitcroft PR, communications agency that's carved out a reputation for cutting through the noise in one of the noisiest industries, crypto. She's also the host of Get to the Point, a podcast that opens with a line I can't stop thinking about. Everyone is talking, but few people are actually saying something. In an industry drowning in jargon, hype cycles, and empty promises, Amanda's built her practice around credibility, clarity, and actually having something worth saying. I'm excited to dig into how she does it. Amanda, welcome to Proof of PR.
Thank you so much for having me, and congrats on season 4.
Thank you. I'm excited to kick off with this episode. To get us started, I'd love to hear about your journey into crypto PR and how you ended up here.
Sure. Well, I initially built in hospitality almost 10 years ago now, and I had close to 30 restaurants and hotels in New York City. And COVID hit, and you can imagine, having a business in that sector, and COVID hit. I lost everyone within a week time span. And the girl working with me at the time, she was very well versed in crypto and blockchain, and she led the way and she said, I think we should go in this direction. And of course, with everything being as accessible as it is today with, YouTube and podcasts like this, I just immersed myself in everything I could, and here we are.
So COVID was the impetus. And have you looked back?
I've no, I shouldn't. I mean, I think I have, but I shouldn't. We've definitely come a long way. This company has gone through the lulls, as I'm sure you are all too familiar with, have pivoted many times with not just clients, but also capabilities and just moving with this very fast-paced industry.
Well, I think foundationally working in any industry prepares you for this work. And I actually worked in hospitality PR earlier in my career too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So the crypto space is notorious for both skepticism and scams. How do you approach building credible narratives for clients in this industry where trust is such a challenge?
It's a great question. I actually start from the assumption that the skepticism is fair. In crypto, distrust isn't a PR issue. In my opinion, it's a signal. And so I don't try to talk people out of their concerns. So I reverse the order. Behavior first, narrative second. I spend a lot of time really digging into what a company does, how it makes its money, how it handles risk. Because if a story can't hold up in a bear market or under regulatory pressure or when a journalist has a hard follow-up, then it's not, it's not a narrative, it's just marketing. And trust in this space comes from showing up consistently over time, not just from clever messaging.
You've written about the creative economy and how it's reshaping communications. And I'm curious about how you see this in crypto specifically, where founders are influential, influencers launch protocols. There's just, yeah, it's kind of immersed here. And everyone's expected to have a personal brand. So how do you navigate this with clients?
Yeah, I remind clients that visibility is not the same thing as leadership. The creator economy has blurred that line everywhere, but crypto really amplified it. My rule of thumb is simple. If your influence only exists when the market is up, it's fragile. My company, we help founders decide who they actually are in public. Are you an operator, a builder, an educator, a skeptic? And then we stay in that lane. And not everyone needs to be loud. In fact, restraint is often, the differentiator now, but a personal brand should deepen trust. It shouldn't replace substance. So I'm very big on it's visibility is not always leadership, like I said.
I love that. How do you decide what persona, each individual is going to take? Do you workshop this with them? Like, how do you decide, okay, this client's going to be an operator in public? Or like, is there any thought to that process?
Usually they're the ones telling you without telling you, if that makes sense. They're when you're having those discovery calls with them, when you're having those group meetings, you can kind of point out, but I will say there is some, as I'm sure you're again very familiar with, some push and tug because you have people in leadership positions who aren't necessarily the voice that you want for the company either. They're not as charismatic or they're not articulate but that's all, there are other avenues to take depending on what someone wants versus what you think should exist.
Yeah, it's an interesting exercise. Like, how do you onboard clients in and discover, what direction you're going to take with them?
I mean, I'll be honest, but I turn down clients sometimes because experience here is really the most invaluable thing I think I have on my side. You learn the things that they want. For example, I'm sure you've heard it before. We want this much placement guaranteed this month. We want to be on these roundup lists. And it becomes kind of like a broker situation where they're allocating this much, and they're saying, okay, and they're regarding you as the mafia. You're holding the key to the kingdom to all the PR, the reporters and the journalists. And as you know, that's just not the case. There has to be relevancy. There has to be, it has to be timely. There needs to be a story, not just, I know this person, therefore let's get you on. So I really am very careful with what I hear, the questions on their end in the beginning, because I'm also interviewing them. If I hear that, I've seen it so many times, it does not go anywhere because they want 0 to 100. And as I said before, consistency is key. And consistency doesn't come from just a couple of roundup lists. I've had clients who didn't even have a tangible product. They pulled an Elizabeth Holmes and they didn't have some, but they wanted to be on roundup lists. They were in beta on their product, but felt that they deserved to be on, the CNBC roundup list and those really big ones that get reshared on social platforms and such. And I before onboarding a client, I listen to the need and the expectation because if it's a quick, we want things immediate, we want New York Times, we want this, then it's not realistic to me. You have to build something, and PR and marketing, especially in this time, it's a slow burn.
Completely. Completely. I always say that our business is built on meeting or exceeding expectations. So if you can kind of get a sense of the expectations and figure out whether what they're giving you is going to, like, you're going to be able to meet or exceed those expectations, then you'll probably have a client for a really long time. But it's where the expectations are misaligned that
Exactly.
this type of work doesn't work as well. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, which is called Get to the Point. And I love your opening line. Everyone's talking, but few people are actually saying something. That line definitely hits hard in crypto where there's so much noise. How do you coach clients into actually saying something, especially when they may be used to hiding behind all the jargon?
It's an uncomfortable question that I ask is, what do you believe might cost you something to say out loud? Like what is the risk they're taking? Because most jargon is just armor. It's a way to avoid taking a position. So to strip things back, um, what problem are you solving? Who is this for? Where do you disagree with the dominant narrative in this industry? If you can't explain what you do to an intelligent outsider without buzzwords, you don't have a communications problem, you have a clarity problem. And I think any job for a publicist is to help clients find language that reflects how they think, not language that hides it. And like I said, that goes along with the consistency as well as, we're not always looking for the most charismatic person in the room, especially at some of the hackathon conferences like in East Denver, where your audience that's going are predominantly builders and, you're very tech driven people. They're not looking for a George Clooney up on those stages to speak eloquently and look good doing it. They want to hear what was the process? How did you come to this idea? How did you get it done? So I think showing up and not being overly concerned with how you're presenting more so than what you're presenting.
Love that. So true. And also like who the audience is, right? Like you just mentioned, making sure that you're speaking to the right audience, depending on what room you happen to find yourself.
Exactly.
So hypothetically, a brilliant crypto founder comes to you. They're technical, maybe a bit introverted, and definitely uncomfortable with self-promotion, but they know that they need thought leadership, as we've talked about, but don't know where to start. What's the first thing that you tell them?
Yeah, and I think I kind of a little answered this in the last one, but it's the first thing I tell them is that thought leadership isn't self-promotion. It's translation. And it's their job isn't to perform or to sell themselves. It's to explain what they see that others don't yet. So we like for a lot of my clients, you start with writing, not speaking. And whether it's long form, low pressure, private drafts, but once founders realize that their value lives in how they think and not how charismatic they are, that resistance usually drops. The goal isn't to turn them into an influencer, it's just to make their thinking more accessible. And to get there, you really, writing sometimes is actually, I mean, that's why how many people are joining Substack or are writing, in addition to maybe video format, they're also having the Substack there just for people who maybe don't always want to watch video, which hence again, my podcast, a lot of people are talking, few people are saying something. A lot of people prefer written format just so they can get to the point and not have to go through the video and the edit because it can be theater for a lot of people. They just know that it's touched up, it's edited, it's to fit a certain narrative that goes along with what they're trying to do that week. So writing, in my opinion, can sometimes be actually more powerful.
And how do you use those writings? Like, what are you using that for? Written quotes, op-eds, things like that, ideas?
Yeah, I think op-eds is a great one. You especially when you're in the trenches with reporters who are just asking, "Hey, I'm writing an article on this. Would your client like to comment?" It's something that's relevant, timely. Substack is a huge one. And then LinkedIn, social media platforms. Utilizing their LinkedIn, X, wherever they are, and just constantly, whether it's they're writing from scratch, something that they're thinking that's relevant, or they're just inserting themselves into the conversation of what is, whether it's tokenization right now, that's the big one, AI and crypto, because of what CZ said at Davos, whatever the relevant topic is, you do have to insert yourself into it. There have been times, and I'm not a huge bigwig like Larry Fink or CZ go into these things, but there have been times I've written my Substack and I'm ready to go, and the entire industry's already moved on from that topic, and they want some, and I'm like, okay, scratch that, and I've had to just completely change my article and pivot because I'm like, this is already old news. I've had podcast guests who I've secured that I'm like, this is old news, and I'm like, I'm sorry, let's reschedule for another time. So you have to relevancy and consistency of whatever format that takes.
Yeah, the news cycle moves so quickly in this industry that it can be tricky, but I also think it's an opportunity.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the creativity of of what we do, is you can find those outlets. You can, because these founders and executives, they're too busy. They're not watching everything. They've got their blinders on for what they need to do that week. And we need to come in and go, here's the big topic right now. You need, where's your positioning on this? And here's what we can do with that.
You mentioned Substack a couple of times, and how are you using that? Are you encouraging founders that you work with to create their own Substack if they love to write, and then using that material to pitch reporters? Or like, how, when you say Substack, what do you mean?
Surprisingly, a lot of companies already have Substacks. They just haven't touched it. So they have like an account that's open and maybe they tried for a month or, a couple months and then it's just sitting there. So it's something to take over. But it depends. If they're very interested in the leadership aspect, you take that executive or founder and that's their personal Substack. I usually recommend the company has a Substack so that there's no pressure on just a one single individual to continuously write, unless you're a publicist or somebody that's in this niche of marketing. I don't think that's necessary. I think the company, so that you hear all the voices, especially in crypto in this industry. You don't just want the founder constantly pushing out content. You want to hear from the entire team.
Do you happen to know if LLMs are scraping Substack for content?
Yes, of course they are.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, because that feels like something that would be an obvious reason to be using that platform as well.
100%. And what's funny is I can tell when things are written by ChatGPT. And I just had a guest on actually, Trevor Kaverko, and I asked him, I said, how does this happen? When AI is training itself on AI written things, is this just some vicious cycle? Because what is it training itself on when people are not even writing their own articles anymore? People are using, and even if it's just to polish up the article, which I'm guilty of, I'll write it and then I have ChatGPT maybe do a little cleanup of it because I don't think it's anywhere near where it can just draft the whole thing for you to sound human. But like where does that where it's like the chicken and the egg. It's like it's training itself, but that it dished it out. So where's it needs that human element in order to evolve as a technology, but it's taking back its own output that, it's interesting.
Most newswire platforms were built for a different era of PR. Mass distribution, bloated pricing, coverage that looks impressive but rarely delivers real visibility. BITWIRE was built to change that. We give modern PR teams direct access to curated Tier 1 publishers that actually reach your audience, from leading crypto and business outlets to global financial media. Instead of blasting your news everywhere, BITWIRE focuses on quality distribution that builds credibility, authority, and search visibility through real placements and permanent links. Every distribution includes guaranteed publication, so you know exactly where your story will appear with no uncertainty and no wasted spend. Our platform lets you create and distribute a press release in minutes through a clean, intuitive workflow designed by PR professionals who understand what's at stake every time you hit publish. With fast turnaround times, your announcement moves quickly from submission to live coverage, helping you stay ahead of fast-moving markets and news cycles. No confusing subscriptions, no unnecessary spend. Just transparent, a la carte pricing so you can choose exactly where your news appears and scale as you grow. And when you need support, our team delivers unparalleled customer service at every step, from submission through publication, ensuring your release runs smoothly and successfully. Because today, it's not about sending your news everywhere. It's about placing it where it matters. BITWIRE, your news amplified.
I find it such a helpful tool, but I agree with you that I can tell when someone's using it too heavily. It's kind of great.
Sure. The hyphens, and then it's like, yeah.
Yeah, ongoing debate about M dashes, because I was like, I always tell AI to take the M dashes out because I feel like it sounds AI. But then Alex, one of our vice presidents, is a huge M dash fan, and she's like, yeah, the AI uses it because it works. Like I've been using these for a decade.
Oh,
So,
you better unlearn that right now.
exactly. I'm curious if you have any tips for founders with relation to thought leadership or advice for people before they hire PR. Like, what are some things that they can be doing in advance of engaging your firm, or thinking about PR and when to engage? Like, what is in their mind, like what is advantageous for them in terms of what they can do before, and when should they be thinking about hiring the PR agency?
So I think founders should start building thought leadership long before they think they need PR, like, hands down. Not when they're fundraising or chasing headlines. The best thought leadership, in my opinion, comes from people who are still in the work. And we just mentioned a few of those avenues that you can take, but just the more explanations to show your decision making instead of just the outcome. Don't chase every narrative either. I mean, PR works best when it amplifies something that's already forming naturally, and it fails when you're manufacturing it out of thin air. And that's where I, explained before, when you have clients coming to you and they want these roundup lists and they're treating you kind of as the broker to the media, that doesn't work. And it's kind of like, and I've been guilty of this in the very beginning of my career, of kind of just, making the client happy and getting them what they want, maybe even sometimes paying for it simply to make them happy, get them off my plate, like, okay, good. But that's all it is. It's temporary high that does not solve anything. It does not go anywhere. And so yeah, thought leadership, I think, is it's the human part of a brand. And if you think of a company like NVIDIA, I think most of us don't think of the number. We think of Jensen Huang. We think of his face immediately when you hear NVIDIA. And I think he is the epitome of thought leadership done very well, because when you hear him speak also, he's not always so technical. He brings a human element to almost every single one of his interviews and talks about kind of the rags to riches story and how, he came from nothing and how he champions the underdog and just what hits home for him. But he's always in person. He's always very thoughtful. And I think that is, that always you see him use those, and they usually, I mean, he's a very well-known founder, so automatically that gets a lot of reshares. But I do think people appreciate that human aspect of which is another part, not just thought leadership in terms of what you're building, but also who you are. People want to know who's behind the company, who's behind this build. And I mean, as much as we appreciate the technical aspect, because we wouldn't have these things otherwise, your majority of people don't understand it. I always equate it to the stock market. Well, it's fascinating to watch. How many people do you know who are actually invested in the stock market, who can actually afford to put up that kind of money to be that invested in it? So, I equate it to the same thing here is, you want to be invested in who that person is in order to not only trust what you're about to use because they're selling you on it, but to get behind the industry at large.
And do you have any specific tactical tips, like platforms, when you say they should be doing thought leadership long before they hire PR? Are you talking about X? Are you talking about LinkedIn? Are you like what platforms and how?
I think to start social media, because let's just say it depends on where they are. If they're brand new with no digital footprint whatsoever, you have to start with social media. You have to start with Substack. You have to start even just, YouTube, putting out videos if they're comfortable. But then eventually you do want to leverage for, your wherever they're based, local magazines of authority, local podcasts, and getting people to reshare that, partnering with KOLs in their respective space, doing a collaboration, even with my podcast, just having certain guests on who have a huge following and having them reshare that content has been huge for me. Because I don't bring that following yet. My metrics aren't through the roof, but when they reshare, all of a sudden I have 20 new followers overnight simply by them resharing that. So there is something to be said about that, I guess that turnkey of kind of knowing what works for your client, similar to events, but now you're using people instead of venues, and you're doing it digitally.
Well, I think people want to follow people at the end of the day. And so and people trust people. So you have to build that trust through the founder-led marketing and thought leadership, rather than the company can't just appear overnight, I wanted to talk about if you have any good examples for like a recent client transformation and what their narrative looked like when they first came to you versus what you helped them build and how that changed.
I mean, I have a lot of use cases where most clients come with a very crowded defensive story. They always come on the defense. I don't know if you realize that too many buzzwords, a lot of anxiety about being misunderstood, or they come to you and they're like, we're doing it better than anybody else. Nobody understands this. Here's how we're doing it. And they're almost overselling you on it, which is another reason I've sometimes turned away from a client. But I had one client recently that was trying to be everything at once, infrastructure, fintech, Web3, enterprise, consumer. And I had to narrow it down to one core insight that they actually understood better than anyone else. And once the story sharpened, like once we just went on that one thing instead of everything, the media conversations improved. Investors asked better questions. The founder sounded more confident because the narrative finally matched reality. So almost every transformation, in my opinion, comes from subtraction, not addition. Like there's nothing you need to add on.
That's a great.
Yeah, you have to peel it back and just, I do think less is more in a lot of cases with clients.
Do you have any tips for helping founders think about how they get to their elevator pitch, how, you just mentioned subtracting, like they come to you and they have we do this and we do that and we do this. And then it sounds like you have the most success with them once they narrow it down to the one key why proposition. How do you help them boil down how they're going to hook people? Because I feel like sometimes in PR, it's like about getting to that hook, and then reporters will ask more questions.
I do think it's a lot of trial and error, and I always put that out there up front, that especially because they're coming to you expecting it. And this is where I say this: there's branding and there's PR and marketing. And it's very difficult when you approach a PR and marketing firm, and we do, without, I think, pitching the service. I think sometimes we take on the role of branding because they're coming to you and they're coming to you with all this information and their roadmap and what their plan is, but very few founders can actually tell you what they do. And it's fascinating. And I guarantee you investors are also sitting behind the table being pitched every single day, and for the life of them can't get a founder to just simply say in one line what they do. They can't say it. And that's where you have those long conversations, and it is work. I mean, that's where the work starts. That's why before PR even gets in, thought leadership happens long before you're even writing for them, long before you're putting them on camera, because you have to have the conversations with them. You have to break it down. It's so many it's workshopping, it's discovery calls, and it's not just this one kickoff call and we're off to the races to get you glorious press and thought leadership. It's a lot of because they'll start talking and they'll start soundboarding with you, not even realizing that they got to their own conclusions simply by talking to you, because they're in their heads. A lot of these founders are so technical, they're not talking. They're in here, and so it's our job to pull it out. And you can only do that by having a lot of conversations. So to get the boilerplate, to get the elevator pitch, it's back and forth. It's asking, almost doing a mock interview sometimes. I'll come prepared as a journalist and say, okay, how would you answer this? And when they can't answer, but they want press, then it's kind of like, okay, well, how are you going to go to this reporter if you can't answer this question? And it's working through those things.
What about with repetition? I feel like that's part of our job too, is helping them to understand that repetition is so important. Do you run multiple sessions over and over to get them comfortable with that pitch?
I don't, to be honest. Repetition, I always fear, I never want a client to feel choreographed. I always want them to be very, intentional with what they're saying, not just memorizing something to continue saying the same thing everywhere they go. I want them to be thoughtful in their answers, but I also want them to have complete clarity of what it means. That can be said in many different ways, because that's where you fall into the trap of buzzwords, is like where you're so well trained that it's, the interviews now become dull. And it's like, why would another reporter take on the story when you're saying the same thing every single time? So while you have the clarity and you have the one message that is down, you have to extract pieces from that to create other stories for different PR purposes.
Completely agree, and I love the way that you frame that. So yeah, I love this. This has been such a great conversation. I want to shift gears a little bit because we connected on something a little bit different, but I think it relates to all of this. So many of us in this industry are so intensely focused on the next milestone, the next headline, the next funding round, but life has a way of stopping us in our tracks and reorienting to what actually matters. You shared with me you experienced a loss or a significant life event that fundamentally changed kind of how you show up in work and in life. And I'm curious if you're willing to share more about that and kind of how it's shaped your work and your life.
Yeah. I mean, yes, so this Valentine's Day will be 10 years since I lost my dad, and it certainly, it just recalibrated everything. I mean, when you have a loss that hits that close to home, especially, you're forced to deal with your own mortality, and it really does, when you experience that type of grief, the surface level success stops impressing you, and it's changed the way when I'm willing to it changes what I'm willing to attach my name to, how I treat people under pressure. what I'm no longer willing to compromise on ethically. I care far more now about whether a narrative is true than whether it's popular. And I'm much less interested in helping anyone win attention at the expense of integrity. And that really is because you're like, okay, wow, I mean, my dad was the rock of our family. You know, we're a very small family. It's my mom, my sister, and myself. And so his loss really was a tremendous blow to our family. And that just, I was like, oh wow, okay, I'll go too one day. It really does force you to deal with your own mortality. And I was like, okay, I have to stop living the way I'm living, and I need to change things up here because I was living more out of habit. I know it sounds so cliche, but I really was just kind of going day by day and not really with intention. So I changed that.
It's such a good reminder. Thank you for sharing that because I think, yeah, this industry has a way of you can get caught up, swept away in all of the pace of it all. But, I love what you shared in the beginning about how selective you are with clients. We're the same way. And, I think that that's probably a direct result of what you just shared in terms of like, what are you willing to align yourself with?
Yeah. No, thank you for letting me share that. It definitely, I take that story with me I mean, I don't always share it out loud, but it's certainly something that's always in the back of my mind with how I do everything day to day.
Okay, so to wrap things up, I want to kind of fast forward and think about the next 5 years of crypto PR. What do you think things are going to look like? I know things are changing quickly. We talked about AI a little bit. What skills are going to matter most? What's changed and what stayed the same, do you think?
I think crypto PR looks much closer to traditional reputation management. It's slower, it's more disciplined. I think all these cases I've cited of the quick wins and the quick, get me here, get me there. I need to know what's guaranteed in month one. I need to know what I get in month two. I mean, I'm even seeing it in the onboarding process of much slower onboarding versus before I used to sign clients like easy peasy, one and it was like every week I'd have a call, I'd sign a client. And now it's months before I'm actually signing a client, or it could be a whole year before we finally sign off. But the hype driven era fades. And I'm so excited for that because I think with all the regulatory literacy that's coming in, the industry won't be judged by how loudly it speaks anymore, but how it behaves. And I think communications is going to really be the pioneer of that. Like people are going to be more invested in the longer term than just, hey, can I hire you for a couple months because I'm doing this little PR stunt?
I feel like that's already starting to happen, but I love that prediction. And I think you're completely right. I think the industry is maturing. I think that people are starting to understand that this is a long game. And so that makes me excited about the future of the industry because the short term transactional nature and the flash in the pan marketing is unsustainable. And it's not great for our industry to align with either.
No. And you have to it's a mutually beneficial. That's why it's very tricky because it goes two ways. Not only are you servicing a client, but they have to trust you. They have to invest in you. It goes two ways. And when you're not incentivizing a publicist to do their job, which is and always has been the long form, because it doesn't with a lot of the thought leadership support and events, you need to commit to at least 1 year to see any sort of benefits to that type of work. Because as I just started a podcast in Substack 2.5, almost 3 months ago now. And I'm still not seeing, like I see little traction here and there. But if I wanted a quick win, I mean, it doesn't happen in 3 months, let alone six. And I know it's consistency. Like I said before, it's disciplined, and that takes time.
Completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us today. Where can people reach out to you or find you? And we'll add this to the show notes as well.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Amanda Whitcroft, same as my ex handle, Amanda Whitcroft. Substack, Amanda Whitcroft. I don't think anybody has my name, so it's always Amanda Whitcroft. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was such a treat.
It was a great conversation. Thank you again. Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by BITWIRE.com, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter at proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.